I drove 412 miles to look into the eyes of the woman who gave birth to me, and when I finally stood in front of her, she looked straight through me like I was a stranger asking for directions. "I don't know who you are," she said. "You have the wrong person." My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the manila folder I'd carried across 3 states. And 28 years of questions spilled out onto her porch floor like they didn't matter at all. "My name is Renata Castillo, though for the first 31 years of my life I went by the name my adoptive parents gave me, Renee Walsh. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio, raised by 2 of the kindest people God ever made, Tom and Carol Walsh. They couldn't have children of their own, and when they adopted me as an infant, they used to tell me I was chosen, that out of every baby in the world, they picked me. I loved that story when I was little. I clung to it the way kids cling to fairy tales, because it made abandonment sound like destiny instead of rejection. But as I got older, the story stopped feeling like enough. I'd look in the mirror and see a face that belonged to nobody else in my house. My mom Carol had pale skin and freckles. My dad Tom was tall and blonde with kind blue eyes. I was olive-skinned, dark-haired, with eyes the color of strong coffee, and a stubborn jaw I didn't recognize in anyone around me. I used to stare at my reflection and wonder, somewhere out there, does someone else have this same face? Does someone else have my eyes? My parents never hid the adoption from me. They were honest, loving, patient. But the agency records were sealed, and back then closed adoptions were exactly that, closed, like a door bricked shut. I grew up with a hole in my chest shaped like a question mark. And no matter how much love poured into that hole from Tom and Carol, it never quite filled. I got married at 26 to a wonderful man named Daniel, a contractor with hands that could build anything and a heart big enough to understand why I needed answers. We had 2 children, Mia and Lucas, and when Mia was born, something cracked open in me. I held my daughter in the hospital, looking at her face thinking, this is the first blood relative I have ever seen in my entire life. My daughter was the first person on earth who shared my DNA, and that thought broke me down sobbing in front of the nurses. That was the moment I decided I needed to find her. My biological mother. I started with a DNA testing kit, one of those mail order ones everyone was talking about. Daniel encouraged me. "Whatever you find," he said, holding my hand, "we'll face it together." I spit into a tube and mailed it off and then waited 6 agonizing weeks, refreshing my email every single day like a woman possessed. When the results came back, there were no close matches at first, just distant cousins, third cousins, people scattered across the Midwest with no clear connection. I almost gave up. But then, 8 months later, a notification popped up, new close family match, 49.8% shared DNA. Half-sibling, her name was Patricia. Patricia Doyle, 34 years old, living in Asheville, North Carolina. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I messaged her immediately, heart hammering, fingers fumbling over the keyboard. "I'm sorry to reach out like this, but the DNA site matched us as half-siblings. My name is Renee. I was adopted at birth. I don't know if this means anything to you, but I'd love to talk if you're open to it." 3 days of silence nearly destroyed me. And then, finally, a reply. "Hi Renee, I think I might know what this is about. Can we talk on the phone?" That phone call lasted 3 hours. Patricia cried. I cried. Daniel sat beside me holding my free hand the entire time. Patricia told me that our mother, a woman named Carmen Reyes, had given up a baby for adoption 28 years ago. A baby Patricia hadn't known existed until just now. "She never told us," Patricia said, her voice cracking. "She never told any of us about you. I learned that I had 2 half-siblings, Patricia, and a brother named Marcus, and that our mother Carmen still lived in a small town outside of Charlotte, North Carolina." Patricia was hesitant, careful with her words. "Renee, I want you to know I believe you, and I want to know you. But our mom, she's complicated. She doesn't talk about the past. I don't even know if she'll want to see you." That warning should have prepared me. It didn't. I spent the next 2 months building up the courage to reach out directly. I wrote letters I never sent, I rehearsed phone calls I never made. Finally, Patricia offered to set up a meeting, a face-to-face introduction, gently, carefully, with her there as a buffer. "I'll tell her you're coming," Patricia promised. "I'll prepare her." I should have trusted that promise meant something. I should have known better than to expect warmth from someone who'd spent 28 years burying a secret so deep she might have convinced herself it never happened. The drive from Columbus to Charlotte took 6 hours. But it felt like crossing an entire lifetime. Daniel offered to come, but I told him no. This was something I needed to do myself, the same way I needed to walk into that hospital room alone the day Mia was born. Some moments belong only to you. I remember every detail of that drive, the gas station where I bought a coffee I never drank, the rest stop where I sat in my car and cried for 20 minutes for no reason I could explain, the moment North Carolina mountains rose up greenish blue on the horizon and something in my chest tightened like a fist. Patricia met me at a diner first, before taking me to Carmen's house. She hugged me the second she saw me, and it was the strangest, most overwhelming feeling, hugging a stranger who shared my blood, who had my same nose, the same crooked smile. "You look just like her," Patricia whispered, studying my face like she was looking at a ghost. "It's eerie, honestly. Does she know I'm coming?" I asked, voice trembling. Patricia hesitated just a beat too long. "I told her," she said. "I told her everything." We drove together to a modest blue house with white shutters, a wraparound porch, wind chimes hanging from the eaves. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Patricia squeezed my hand before we got out of the car. "Whatever happens," she said, "I'm glad you found us." I carried a manila folder filled with photographs, pictures of me as a baby, pictures of Mia and Lucas, copies of my adoption papers, the DNA test results. I thought, foolishly, that evidence would matter. I thought facts could open a heart that had spent decades locked shut. Carmen Reyes opened the door before we even knocked. She was a small woman, 61 years old, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back tight, sharp eyes, and a posture like she was bracing for an earthquake. For one suspended second, our eyes met, and I swear something passed between us, recognition, maybe, or fear, or both tangled together so tight you couldn't tell them apart. Then her face went cold, flat, like a door slamming shut behind glass. "Patricia, what is this?" she said, voice sharp. "Mom, this is Renee. I told you about her. I don't know who this is," Carmen interrupted, looking directly at me with an expression so blank, so deliberately empty, that it knocked the breath out of me. "I don't know this woman, Mom," Patricia said, her voice climbing with disbelief. "I told you everything on the phone. The DNA match. The dates. It all lines up." "I don't know what you're talking about," Carmen said again, folding her arms, eyes hard as stone. "I never had another baby. You have the wrong person." I stood there frozen, the manila folder clutched against my chest like a shield, watching the only biological mother I would ever know deny my existence to my face. My carefully rehearsed words evaporated. I had imagined 1,000 versions of this moment, tearful reunions, awkward apologies, even angry confrontations, but never this. Never a flat, calm, deliberate erasure. "I have my adoption records," I managed to say, voice cracking. "I have the DNA results. I was born March 14th, 28 years ago, at Mercy General in Charlotte. I just want to understand. I'm not here to disrupt your life. I just want to know who I am." Carmen's jaw tightened. For one fragile second, something flickered behind her eyes, pain, maybe, or memory clawing its way up from wherever she'd buried it. Then it vanished, replaced by that same icy composure. "I think you should leave," she said quietly, and she closed the door. I stood on that porch in stunned silence, the folder slipping from my fingers, papers scattering across the welcome mat, photographs of my children, of myself as an infant, fluttering in the warm Carolina breeze like confetti from a celebration that never happened. Patricia knelt beside me, gathering the papers, her own eyes wet with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I thought after everything I told her, she'd at least talk to you. We sat in Patricia's car for nearly an hour while I cried until my chest ached. until I had no tears left, just hollow exhaustion. Patricia held my hand the entire time, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say that could fix what had just been broken or maybe what had never been whole to begin with. That night, in a cheap motel room outside Charlotte, I called Daniel, sobbing so hard he could barely understand me. She denied me, I kept saying, over and over, like saying it enough times might make it less true. She looked at me and said she didn't know who I was. Daniel didn't try to fix it with empty words. He just stayed on the phone with me for 3 hours, listening to me cry, occasionally whispering, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone in this." I almost drove home the next morning. I almost let it end there, swallowed the rejection like I'd swallowed so much else in my life, filed it away under things I'll never understand. But something kept nagging at me, that flicker I'd seen in Carmen's eyes before the ice slammed back down. People don't deny strangers with that much desperation. People deny things that terrify them precisely because those things are true. I stayed in Charlotte 3 more days. Patricia, despite her mother's rejection, refused to abandon me. She introduced me to my half-brother Marcus, a quiet, thoughtful man who worked as a high school science teacher. Marcus studied my face for a long moment when we met, then said simply, "You have her hands." The exact same hands, over dinner that second night. Patricia finally told me the truth their mother had spent 28 years hiding. Our mom got pregnant when she was 33. Patricia said, voice low, careful. She wasn't married to our dad yet. The baby was the result of an affair she had during a really dark time in her marriage. Dad found out she was pregnant by another man. He gave her an ultimatum, give the baby up, or lose everything, him, her marriage, her place in this family, in this town. She chose to give the baby up. She chose us. I sat there absorbing this, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. "So she remembers me," I whispered. "She's always known exactly who I am. She's spent almost 3 decades pretending it never happened," Marcus said quietly, burying it so deep that lying about it probably feels more like survival to her than dishonesty. Our dad died 8 years ago, but by then the secret had become part of the foundation of this whole family. I don't think she knows how to dig it back up without everything collapsing. That doesn't make it okay, I said, my voice shaking with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief, some third thing I didn't have a name for. She looked at me like I was nothing, like I was a problem to be managed instead of a person. "I know," Patricia said, reaching for my hand again, "and I'm not defending her. I'm just trying to explain her. There's a difference." I went home to Ohio carrying a grief I hadn't expected, not grief for a relationship I'd lost, because you can't lose what you never had, but grief for the relationship I would now never get to have. For months afterward, I struggled. I'd catch myself crying in the grocery store over nothing, snapping at Daniel over small things that weren't really about him at all. Carol, my mom, my real mom, the one who'd actually raised me, noticed something was wrong and sat me down one evening at her kitchen table. The same table where she used to help me with homework as a child. "You went looking for roots," Carol said gently, "and you found a woman who couldn't give you any. But Renee, honey, roots aren't the only thing that makes a tree grow. Sometimes the strongest trees grow from grafted branches, planted in soil that wasn't originally theirs." I cried in her arms that night the way I hadn't cried since I was a little girl. And for the first time since that porch in Charlotte, something inside me began, slowly, to unclench. Patricia and Marcus stayed in my life. We texted regularly, video called on holidays. And 18 months after that disastrous first meeting, Patricia flew up to Ohio to meet Mia and Lucas in person, to stand in my kitchen and watch my children play, to be, in her own words, the aunt I never knew I had. Then, almost 2 years after that porch encounter, everything shifted again. I got a phone call on a Tuesday evening, while I was making dinner, Lucas doing homework at the counter beside me. It was Marcus. "Renee," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop immediately. "Mom had a stroke. She's in the hospital. It's serious." I don't fully know why I drove down there. Maybe it was simple human decency, the instinct to show up when someone is dying, regardless of history. Maybe it was the small, stubborn hope that had refused to die even after everything, the hope that there might still be time for something different between us. Daniel didn't question it. He just packed my bag while I called the hospital for visiting hours. When I walked into that hospital room in Charlotte, Carmen Reyes looked nothing like the cold, composed woman who'd shut the door in my face 2 years earlier. She looked small in that hospital bed, fragile, half her face slightly slack from the stroke, tubes running into her arm, machines beeping their quiet rhythm beside her. Patricia and Marcus stood near the window, both looking exhausted, grief etched into their faces. When Carmen's eyes opened and found mine, I watched recognition pass over her face, not denial this time, not that icy blankness, but something raw and unguarded, something that looked almost like relief. "You came," she whispered, her words slightly slurred from the stroke. "I came," I said simply, pulling a chair close to her bed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The machines beeped. Outside, rain had started against the window, soft and steady. "I was a coward," Carmen finally said, her good hand reaching weakly toward mine. "I was so afraid of what it would mean admitting you existed that I made you disappear instead. I told myself for 28 years that erasing you was the same as protecting everyone else. But it wasn't protection. It was cruelty. I see that now. I think some part of me always knew it, but knowing and admitting are very different animals." Tears streamed down my face as I held her trembling hand. "Why?" I asked, the question I'd carried for 2 years finally finding its way out. "Why did you say you didn't know me? Even if you couldn't claim me, even if you couldn't explain everything to Patricia and Marcus right then, why deny me to my face?" "Because looking at you," Carmen whispered, "was like looking at every choice I was too afraid to make. You were proof of who I really was underneath everything I'd built, the affair, the shame, the lie I told myself that giving you up made me a good mother instead of a frightened one. Denying you felt, in that single terrible moment, easier than admitting all of that to myself. Standing on my own front porch, I needed you to see me," I said, my voice breaking. "Not the shame, not the past, just me. I see you now," she said, gripping my hand as tightly as her weakened body allowed. "I see you, Renee. I'm so sorry it took me almost dying to find the courage I should have had on that porch." We talked for nearly 2 hours that evening about my children, about Tom and Carol, about the life I'd built, about the years she'd spent in silence, trapped by a secret that had cost her more than she'd ever admit aloud. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. You don't erase 28 years of absence and 1 devastating rejection in a single hospital conversation. But it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain. The first true beginning we'd ever had. Carmen recovered slowly over the following months, with significant physical therapy and a long road back to partial mobility. I visited 3 more times that year, bringing Mia and Lucas with me the second time. I watched Carmen's eyes fill with tears as she held her grandchildren for the first time, her hands shaking this time from age and recovery, not from fear. "They have your eyes," she told me, watching Mia chase Lucas across her small backyard. "I always wondered, all these years, whose eyes you had. Now I know they're mine." It's been 3 years now since that porch in Charlotte. Carmen and I will never have the relationship some daughters have with their mothers. Too much time was lost. Too much damage was done in that single devastating moment of denial. But we have something. Phone calls every other Sunday. Christmas cards. A fragile, evolving understanding built slowly out of the wreckage of what came before. I learned something important through all of this. Something I carry with me now every single day. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally fail us in the most painful ways imaginable, not because we aren't worthy of love, but because they're carrying their own fear, their own shame, their own unfinished business that has nothing to do with us at all. Carmen's denial that day on her porch wasn't really about me. It was about everything she'd never made peace with inside herself. I also learned that family isn't only blood, and blood isn't only family. Carol and Tom Walsh, 2 people who shared no DNA with me whatsoever, gave me a lifetime of unconditional love, stability, and belonging that no biological connection could have guaranteed. And Patricia and Marcus, Siblings I'd never known existed chose me actively, repeatedly, even when their own mother couldn't, and that choosing meant more than any blood test result ever could. If you're watching this and you're searching for someone, a biological parent, a sibling, a piece of your own history that feels like a locked door, I want you to know something. You might not get the reunion you imagine. You might, like me, stand on someone's porch and watch them deny your very existence. But that rejection doesn't define your worth, and it doesn't have the final say in your story. Sometimes the door that slams shut today opens again, years later, in a hospital room, in a moment of fear and honesty neither of you expected. And if it never opens again at all, you are still whole. You are still worthy of love, worthy of belonging, worthy of every good thing life offers you, with or without the woman who once denied you on a porch in North Carolina. I am Renee Walsh Castillo, daughter of Tom and Carol, half-sister to Patricia and Marcus, daughter however imperfectly to Carmen. I am a mother to Mia and Lucas, wife to Daniel, and finally, after 28 years of searching, a woman who knows exactly who she is, not because someone finally claimed me, but because I learned, through every painful step of this journey, to claim myself.